And welcome back to the Tampa Bay Rays podcast, everybody. My name is Chris Adams Wall, and hopefully all of your New Year's resolutions are still intact. I know that I talked to Rays manager Kevin Cash about his at the winter meetings in Orlando last month. And while the return to Tropicana Field is certainly near the top of the list, I think at the very top of Kevin Cash's list is getting back to the playoffs. And we have the pleasure of being joined now by Rays Vice President and Assistant General Manager Kevin Ibach, who has returned from about a 3-day spell in the Dominican Republic. But unfortunately, Kevin, you're back in Florida where it's also chilly, so maybe you want to go back to the Dominican Republic sometime soon. But thanks so much for being with us as always.
No, thanks. Thanks for having me, Chris. Was a fun couple days there in the DR, and glad to be back back in the States here, and anxious to get going for spring training.
No doubt, and it is right around the corner. We're actually less than a month from the start of spring training now. Kevin, I saw you at the winter meetings in Orlando, and there were some whispers about what the Rays were going to be doing, some trades they might be making, some free agents they could possibly be bringing in. Well, one of those guys was Steven Matz, a veteran lefty who's been around not only Major League Baseball, but the American League East. It was a 2-year deal, $15 million. Can you just tell our listeners how this all came about and how the Rays are going to view Steven Matz going into 2026?
Sure. We were on the lookout this offseason to bring in a veteran starting pitcher. We've had success with that profile before. You think about back to Charlie Morton, Corey Kluber, Zach Eflin. I not only do they bring a lot of experience and savvy to the table every fifth day that they're starting, but they also can really raise the floor of the young starters around them. So that was a demographic that we've been hunting all off season. Had a few different candidates that fell into that bucket. Matt's being a left-handed pitcher, was very unique there. We saw a lot of opportunity to bring him in despite his age. In our discussions with him and his agent, thought that there was some things that we could unlock, obviously with Kyle Snyder and his group and what they've done for guys' careers, whether they're, beyond 30 or whether they're, much at the infancy of their career. So I think that, both parties felt like this would be a really good fit, and it was just a matter of making the numbers work. And that all came together, right there at the winter meetings.
And I know last season, I talked to Andy Fried and Neil Solondz about this on our most recent episode. Matz was used almost exclusively as a relief pitcher. He did make a couple of starts for St. Louis at the beginning of the year, but then he was traded midway through the season to the Boston Red Sox, where he also came out of the bullpen. How do you envision the Rays using Steven Matz? Do you think it will be exclusively as a reliever, or is this a guy that you kind of see working in the rotation?
Well, honestly, that's what we appreciated about Steven, having experience both, in a starting rotation, in a bullpen, very selfless personality, very good teammate. And he said he's been consistent through this all, that he's willing to do whatever helps us win games, whatever is best for our team, he will do. I think we'll bring him into spring training with every opportunity to take the ball as a starter. But there are some starting pitchers on the free agent market that don't have that versatility, that don't have that willingness to be flexible, depending upon how the rest of the offseason plays out. So at that particular juncture, knowing that there's a month or two of offseason remaining, that was an added layer of security to be able to bring Steven in and know that there's some versatility to that profile. But again, where we stand today on January 15th, I think this is something that, we look at him as a starter coming into spring training.
And the starting pitchers the Rays have right now are overall pretty young. I mean, you just kind of go down the list. Ryan Pepio, Drew Rasmussen, a guy like Joe Boyle, Ian Seymour even started a number of games last season. Steven Matz, like you said, 34 years old. And you said that, well, despite his age, we're going to bring him in here. I know you say that jokingly, tongue-in-cheek, but what kind of effect could that have on a group of young pitchers?
Yeah, and it's really hard to put a dollar amount on that or really quantify, some of those small, subtle effects that you see in a clubhouse, in the bullpens in spring training, some of the banter, the back and forth. that, there's lived experience there that some of our pitchers don't have, as talented as they are. I think even like a Shane McClanahan, being a fellow left-handed pitcher, should be able to pick up something from Steven, despite Shane himself being very much a frontline starter. So, we hope that will rub off on the rest of the group. We hope that those conversations, that insight that he has, that lived experience is just something that everyone can really pull from.
And now it's been almost a month since the Rays made two of their bigger trades, I think we can say, in recent memory. Brandon Lowe going to the Pittsburgh Pirates in the three-way deal with the Houston Astros, and then, of course, Shane Baz going to the Baltimore Orioles for a bunch of prospects and a draft pick. Let's start with the Brandon Lowe deal. Jake Mangum goes up to Pittsburgh also. Mason Montgomery going with him. And, of course, Brandon Lowe going up there to the Steel City. But the Rays get outfielder Jacob Melton from the Houston Astros, and they get a right-handed pitcher named Anderson Brito from Houston's farm system. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Rays like about both of those players? The Rays, of course, saw Melton, albeit for only, a game or two earlier this season, but that's kind of how these trades go with the Rays. You think about the Pete Fairbanks deal. They saw just a little bit of him in playing for the Texas Rangers, and before you know it, he's a Ray for 5-6 years. So what do you like about those two players, though, in Jacob Melton and Anderson Brito, Kevin?
Yeah, obviously we gave up three very talented players in that deal, as you mentioned, Chris, and I think that's always tough to do when you're giving up talent. But in Jacob, this is a guy that we think can impact the game on both sides of the ball. He's a very good defensive outfielder, can play center field. And offensively, you look at his minor league track record, and it's pretty impressive. What he did in Sugarland last year, was very impressive. And every player, as we've seen, whether it be Carson Williams, in our own organization or elsewhere, that some players have hiccups when they come to the big leagues, and they're making that adjustment. So Jacob got that taste last year, which I think is very helpful, heading into an offseason. He knows what he needs to work on, whether it's the speed of the game, whether it's some of the swing decisions that he was making at the major league level. But so much of his career and his track record points to a player that's really balanced on both sides of the ball. So, we're really leaning heavily into, the back of the baseball card, so to speak, that he's accomplished throughout his career, and see a guy that's going to come in and compete to be an everyday outfielder in spring training. And if he does need a little bit more seasoning in AAA, that's fine. But we think this is a guy that can really help us on both sides of the ball. So much of our worth, you talk about the Jake Mangums of the world, and you talk about, the Johnny DeLucas and some of the other ones, is the ability to really impact defensively in center field. And Jacob can do that with, we have a good, dating back to KK, Brett Phillips, Jose Siri. We've always run out plus defenders in center field. And, Jacob should be no different in that regard. With the ability to play all three spots. So it sets a very nice defensive floor while also giving you some upside with the bat, as we've seen in the minor leagues. And then Anderson Brito, undersized right-handed pitcher with an electric arm. I remember back in the day seeing Brian Bayo for the Red Sox on the backfields in Port Charlotte and thinking you can really look past the size because of the arm talent that's there. And I think Brito kind of falls into that demographic of plus fastball, plus slider, has a deeper repertoire, mixes in a curveball, a changeup. I think with him, he's shown the affinity to move bats, move barrels, miss bats throughout his minor league career. And we just need to dial him in a little bit more in the strike zone and get him ahead into advantage counts. But that's something that Kyle and his group and certainly Winston Doom and Buddy Carlisle on the minor league side, have a track record of doing. So excited to bring that kind of arm into the organization and, add him to the stable.
And then the Shane Baz deal goes down on the exact same day. That must have been one heck of a December 19th for Kevin Ibach and company, with Eric Neander there and everyone else in the Rays front office. But Shane Baz goes to the Orioles, Kevin, and in return, the Rays get 4 prospects and a draft pick. We know their names. We don't know a whole lot about them. But first and foremost, that's quite a return for one player, right? I know Baz is a major leaguer, and the other 4 have not played in the major leagues yet, but the Rays probably have to be very happy with what they got back.
Oh, absolutely. I think that we went into this offseason with no preconceived notion about trading Shane Baz, and, appreciate everything that Shane, brought to the organization since we first acquired him, in a pretty good deal itself. So, this was not something that was on our radar a month ago, 2 months ago. It kind of came together quickly, and, credit Baltimore for being aggressive. A lot of times in these trades, when you're going back and forth with another team, there's a general reluctance to add talent to a deal. And that's why you don't see deals happen as frequently, especially the size of a deal like this. But Baltimore was aggressive. They came in, continued to add players to the deal, and it got to a point where we just couldn't say no. It all came together very quickly, unexpectedly, and the fact that I was at my daughter Kinley's gymnastics meet that day, trying to QB a lot of this while watching her perform, and that's proof in the pudding there that this was not something that we expected to go down as quickly as it did rather, but happy with the outcome.
I think that's going to do it. Kevin Ibach, Rays Vice President and Assistant General Manager, we appreciate the time as always, and we'll look forward to seeing you down in Port Charlotte very soon. Thanks again for being on the program today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Chris.
And that will do it for all of us here on the Tampa Bay Rays podcast. We will be back with you again soon. I'm sure we're going to talk about the Fan Fest that's coming up on February 14th, just outside Tropicana Field. Really looking forward to that. And, of course, the start of spring training. But thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.